All right, gents. So we may as well get off to the races here. I'll just keep cooking a myth and try to multitask here if I'm capable of that. I'm excited though. Welcome everybody. This is Junior Resource Investing. My name is Matthew. I'm going to start off as always here. We'll get into it right away. That please, as a disclaimer, understand that this is informational and entertainment purposes only, right? There's going to be forward-looking statements involved. That's the nature of the business with these conversations. So please keep that in mind and understand that, yeah, we are not financial advisors. Please do not consider this to be financial advice. I'm excited to have Scott here today, but you have to make your own financial decisions, right? And again, one more time here, just for those who may be coming in late, please make sure that video and audio are off. I just want to say once more though, my name is Matthew. I host Junior Resource Investing. I've been gracious, or Scott has been gracious enough rather, to appear on my show a few times now, and this is the third time, Scott, fourth time, somewhere in there.
I think so.
Yeah, lose track of all the good times, right? But so no, he's gracious enough to join us here today. I also have a new co-host, if you remember from the last few. Mark, I think is in Europe, gallivanting around Europe right now. So I've called in another Brit to be my backup here. Jamie Vinnels is a freelance petroleum geologist. He'll be riding shotgun here with me today. But we are here to interview Scott MacMillan. Scott, of course, is the managing director of Invictus Energy. Invictus, of course, I'll just read a quick blurb here. I'm going to guess that most of you know exactly who this gentleman is, but maybe there's one or two of you who wandered in here off the street and need some context. But Invictus is opening one of the last untested large frontier rift basins in onshore Africa, the Cabora Bassa Basin in northern Zimbabwe. The first high-impact well, Mukuyu-1, came back frustratingly close to a discovery announcement just a month or so ago, and the company is now preparing its next move in this highly prospective basin. Scott is here today then to hopefully shed some light on the recent past, those results, as well as the near future of Invictus. Scott, yeah, thank you. I appreciate your time. How are you today?
Good, thanks, Matthew. Nice to be back, and thanks for hosting again, and for Jamie for stepping in as well.
Yeah, no, and yeah, always appreciate your time. Yeah, very much so. Well, why don't this is actually going to be a half step removed from where maybe people want us to be starting, but you had some news out today. You have a new chairperson, you have a new board member, John Bentley. Do you mind just discussing to us who he is and what he brings to Invictus?
Sure. So yeah, delighted to have John Bentley join the board of Invictus as the non-executive chairman. So John has got a stellar track record in the African E&P sector. He started out in his career in oil and gas with Energy Africa, which was the upstream business that got spun out of Engen, which is the big South African conglomerate. So they're basically refiners and downstream and retail of refined products, but they had an upstream business as well, which got spun out. And John headed that up as the head of Energy Africa, it was called. He led the IPO of that business. So he raised, this was in 1996, raised $100 million for Energy Africa at that point to fund their portfolio, which was a lot of money in 96. And they had a large portfolio, led discoveries in Equatorial Guinea with SIBA, got them into places like Congo, Angola, Uganda, built that portfolio. Gabon as well. They went around and bought up all of the back-end rights of the Gabon oil company, and so John led that business. Petronas was the large shareholder in that, and ultimately he had a disagreement with the direction of it, so they left. But after Petronas tried to sell it, ultimately it got sold to Tullow for $500 million and formed the basis of Tullow's modern day portfolio as it is now. So Jubilee, Uganda, which got sold off, so Jubilee and 10, the other field are the crown or the jewels in Tullow's crown for those assets, and that was all set up by John. From there, he went to a bunch of other companies, mainly Africa focused. So you've had First Africa Oil that was acquired. You've had Rift Oil acquired by Talisman. You've had Vanco, which again was sort of Equatorial Guinea and West Africa focused. Faro Petroleum acquired by DNO, Caracal, who are in Chad, again acquired by Glencore. So he's got a history of taking companies from where they are, building them and making them attractive to the point where people come knocking and scoop them up, and those companies have all gone on to do very, very well. So John's a very, very well-known identity in the oil patch, both from an industry perspective, but also from a corporate perspective. So post the results of the drilling campaign, we've had some reflection on what the composition of the board needs to be, and so John's come in to assist both as he's a fantastic chairman, but also helped a lot on the corporate side of the business, and he's got some fantastic contacts. Led the development of assets post discovery, M&A. So he's got a broad skill set and a broad set of contacts. I'll also give you a sneak peek that we're going to be bringing on a second new board member. He'll be announced in a couple of days. But someone who used to work with John at Energy Africa and helped build up that portfolio, so from a technical basis, and then went on and stayed on at Tullow, and was one of their rainmakers in the exploration group that led all of those discoveries in Kenya, Uganda, Ghana. So we've got some very, very fantastic additions to the board and to the team that are really going to help the company drive forward, both from a strategy point of view, from a corporate point of view, technical point of view. So really pleased that we've been able to attract such high caliber people to the board.
Mm-hmm. And so is it a fair statement to make that the skill sets that they're bringing are Invictus transitioning from explorer to potential developer, and these are the skill sets that you're trying to acquire?
Yeah, that's right. And also we've post the first drilling campaign, we're now a more mature company, and with the results we've been able to attract fantastic people, like John Bentley, and I won't divulge who's joined the board on a technical basis. That'll be in the next couple of days. I don't want to ruin and steal his thunder, but the very reason that we can attract these sort of people is because of the quality of the asset. Invictus is at an exciting time. You don't get these sort of opportunities very often to join a company in this sort of phase. So, but again, to help manage the workloads now, because we are going to be busier and have some diverse opinions. The previous board was together for quite a long time, for 4 odd years or so. So it's always good to refresh and bring in some fresh eyes, and but also guys who've done it before and are very experienced and know exactly how to lead us in the direction that we like to go.
And not to belabor the point here, but just one more follow up here, if I may, is just the hiring process. I mean, how did you shoulder tapping, or how did he come about? Did he throw his name in the ring? Did you search him out? What was the process like?
Yeah, so when we launched it, when Stuart let us know that he couldn't continue because of the personal reasons. This was in early September. We started a worldwide search for We started a worldwide search and went through a recruiting agent who we used before, and that was that we used to recruit Stuart. So we started that process, and but also we expected the drilling campaign to be finished much earlier, obviously, and we were going to put someone in the chair then. But then with things continuing a little bit longer than we anticipated, and with the results we had, we also had a lot of people put their hands up to say, see that Stuart's retired, I'm interested in if the position is open, if you're to join the board. So it was a combination of a search process and a formal search process that we launched, and also through some contacts. And John came in through a guy called Duncan Park, who started Africa Oil Week, and he again, very experienced guy. And Africa Oil Week in its heyday, when Duncan was running it, was a fantastic event, because he was a petroleum economist. He'd written a lot of books on the African oil sector. He knew everyone, and it was really a deal-making forum and a place to go to for everyone. And so Duncan had all of these contacts, and so we reached out to him through Barry, our country manager, and said, "Look, have you got any people that you would suggest?" And John's name came up, and from our first conversation, it was pretty clear that John was a fantastic. I never met John, but I did know his reputation. I was delighted when he expressed interest, and we had a couple of conversations, and very like-minded in the direction that we'd like to go and trying to build the company. So, it was a very easy decision for him as chair. And then we also, in the wash up of the drilling campaign, looking at what we needed from a technical point of view, and to balance the board off with some more technical capability, so it's not all just resting on my shoulders as well. So. And particularly having a skill set of someone with a geoscience background on the board, I think is important. And so we also wanted to complement and round off the board skill sets with someone from a G&G background, and that's what we've done with this upcoming appointment as a non-exec who's a more technical appointment. So the combination of both of them, people putting their hands up as well and interested in joining, and a formal search process.
Perfect, thank you. So we'll transition here to, more perhaps what people are expecting from this conversation. And maybe if we may, not to call it a postmortem, but, now that some weeks have passed and there's time, some time has created distance between Mukuyu-1 and us now, right? I mean, I can only imagine as an outsider, it was such a tantalizingly close but frustrating sort of sequence of events. Do you mind just, as you would or as you will, could you just kind of run us through what was life like for you in those kind of the few weeks in December there in the run-up where they were just kind of the organized chaos, right? Or anything that sticks out to you that maybe you just kind of want to think maybe paints a picture for where you were at, for what was going on?
Yeah, sure. It was, look, obviously, talk about the campaign as a whole and some specific periods, but in the lead up to it, excited, obviously nervous, when we decided that we were going to back ourselves to go in and shoulder this frontier basin, never been drilled before. We thought it was the right thing to do, but statistics tell you otherwise. This is an extremely difficult game. Oil and gas exploration and frontier basin, the success rate, 95 times out of 100, you go home with your tail between your legs, and that's it. So we were quietly confident, but no one goes out intending to drill a dry well. And there have been lots of people before that who were in exactly the same position as we were, who didn't find anything, and those are company killers. And so I was very, very aware of that more than likely possibility. We were gonna live by the sword and die by the sword. So in the lead up to the spud, frustrating because we had the delays with the rig, we had delays with the service company mobilizing, and we just wanted to kind of get started up to doing all the hard work and get everything away. So that was good, and we had a couple of surprises early on with the state of the equipment that arrived to us that was extremely disappointing. But we had a very good team, and we worked through that and got through that. So there was a lot of frustration and excitement at the beginning. I then went over and I had Africa Week and Africa Energy Week 2 weeks apart, and so went to spend some time in Zimbabwe, and in between those two conferences out at the well site. And we started drilling the 12 1/4 inch hole through that period. And I was in the office initially with when we were chatting, and we had a couple of unpleasant surprises where the surface test of the LWD equipment failed at surface for the resistivity, and we said, okay, we'll run the backup, and then we were sheepishly told that, oh well, sorry, the backup's on at the well site, which again was a shock because they were on the inventory of what had been sent out to the well site. And so we started drilling that section and switched once that's done, you do a top hole section, the first like 590 meters, whatever it was, and then we started drilling that section, and that's when you turn on all of the, you got your BOPs in place there, and you got your mud gas. So we turned on the mud gas. I was up when we started drilling that section, and it was showing like 4 ppm, 4 parts per million C1, which from a background gas perspective, each background measurement is different, but there should have been more from a background perspective. And I thought, oh my God, this basin is completely bone dry, and we are wasting our time. And it was pretty devastating, that initial period. And we drilled through it okay. We didn't have the resistivity, so we had mud gas that didn't appear to be showing anything, and we dropped. And we did the calibration checks, and they would blip and then drift back, and drop some carbide bombs in there. And for those experienced geos, it's like a calibration pill that you put downhole that'll show a spike in C2 in ethane. And that kind of went off a little bit, but we had some suspicions that it wasn't working. But we only had gamma ray and cuttings to go on in that 12 1/4 inch hole section, so we were really flying blind, and we didn't know what was going on. And then we drilled through that 200 target, and we saw some nice clean sands, but nothing showed on the mud gas. So, and we didn't have the resistivity tool because the primary failed, and there was no backup. So I was a little bit bummed when I was out there at the well site, but didn't want to show, we had our crew out there, didn't want to show any emotion, and that I was feeling despondent. Let's say that we hadn't, and not to say that we should have seen anything, should have seen something on the mud gas, but at that stage we didn't know that it wasn't working. So, and then we got some speeding tickets, where people were complaining that we were leaking results. And so I woke up 5 a.m. the one morning on the rig site and, had an ASX speeding ticket to go to. And I hadn't been watching the share price at all. We'd set destiny in our own hands, and what we were doing on a day-to-day basis didn't make a difference to the share price. Ultimately, we would, what happened was going to be dictated by the results. But I knew that things weren't going well so I actively stayed away from looking at the share price because it doesn't help me focus on the job at hand and concentrating on what we need to do. But knew that things weren't going well because of the abusive emails that I was receiving. So the only time I knew what the share price had done was when we got these speeding tickets and it showed you, what the price was. I was like, oh Jesus, this is going really poorly. So, that was very, very frustrating, that period where didn't think that things had gone as we'd hoped in that top 200 target. And then we had, some unnecessary, abuse from people, and then accused of leaking and having to answer, ASX price and volume queries. So that was a horrible period during that phase. And so we finished up that 12.25 inch section. I was on the plane on the way back to Perth and was mentally writing the kind of announcement on the plane home. And all right, we've still got the main target coming up, and then we ran the Y line. And I think I arrived home on the Saturday afternoon. Saturday evening, I get a text message or a WhatsApp from the ops geo saying, I think we've got something here. So he sent a screen cap of that interval in the 200, nice clean gamma rays we'd seen on the LWD, but the resistivity went all the way over onto the right hand side, nice separation, and the neutron as well crossed over. The density on that failed though, on that run, the density sonde. So all right, so now I'm like, oh, thank God, the pressure's come off. We're off to the races here, and it's just going to make the rest of the campaign so much easier having some early success in our first target. Then, so overnight they reran the density tool in the second run, and that came back, and we had a very, very strange reading from it, very, very high density reading, about 2.9, which is very, very odd. Sandstone is 2.65, and when it's got gas in it, from grams per centimeters cubed, and when it's got gas in it, it's lower because the overall density of it changes because gas is lighter than brine in the reservoir. So we were head scratching, trying to make sense of it. Went through the cuttings. We had different cuttings descriptions from different well site geos, and wasn't really sure if they'd been mixed up. So it was a real head scratcher, and ultimately we looked at it and didn't think that that we'd be able to get a sample out of it just because of the porosity aspect, because the density was. So we've got some funky mineralogy in there that is awaiting now some testing, but what we subsequently discovered is the mud gas wasn't working. So anyway, we had that tease in the first hole section, the 12.25, and then we started drilling the 8.5 inch section, and had a lot of issues with the cement jobs, with a lot of flat time because of the cement jobs equipment wasn't ready. It broke down, so a lot of it was incredibly frustrating. Where you're just trying to get into your next hole section, do it efficiently, and get in and get out. So then we started drilling the 8.5 inch section, and we went through the base of the forest, and then into the pebbly arcos, and we started taking these huge losses, total losses in some of it. And the mud tank systems on the 202 rig aren't that efficient, and so to make up a new batch of mud would take like 16 hours, and then you've got to circulate all this what's called bar circulation material down to try and plug it all up and stabilize the wells so that you can carry on. And that happened about 3 times. And in one instance we did that, and we drilled another 17 meters, and then it happened again. So so then I think on the Monday, and we did that a few times, and then I was really now panicking because we'd had an inconclusive result in the 200. We were battling through the pebbly arco section. We didn't know whether we'd be able to actually complete the well. We were starting to run out of mud because it just kept disappearing. So I was very, very nervous at the stage that we hadn't it looked like this was going to be a pretty ordinary result. So called everyone in together on the Monday morning and said, look, we can't just keep drilling 17 meters, taking total losses and do that. It's not a viable plan. So we had a look and how much further of the section we could go to, looked at lowering the mud weights and what we could do. And eventually we managed to limp through the bottom of the pebbly arcos, and but just before that we started to see some fluorescence, just some trace fluorescence in the pebbly arcos. So we knew we were seeing some more encouraging signs at that stage. So then we'd been whinging about the mud gas system, and we said this thing is not working properly. And they'd sent some techs out, and they said, no, everything's fine, it's calibrated, and it would switch on and then just really fade back down to minimum amounts. And then eventually we insisted, said, no, this has got to be, there's something wrong here. Send someone out, and this needs to be fixed properly. Anyway, eventually it switched on and started working, and this was right just beneath the upper angua that we'd gone through, and we saw that lithology change, and all of a sudden this thing switched on, and there was a decent amount of background gas. And so then we were happier that we were in an active petroleum system in the basin. So that was a huge sigh of relief, and we started to the top 200 meters of the upper angua is a very, very thick shale section. So we were still in that when the mud gas turned on. So we got background gas through the shale, so we were more confident now. We knew there was reservoir beneath us, and that we were in with a decent chance. So then when we started going through the first reservoir sections in the background gas, we had huge elevated gas above background. That's when I relaxed. And then when we got to that first kind of big show at 3,067 meters, I think, and we saw 100% fluorescence, I woke up early in the morning, and I just had an email from my ops geo saying 100% fluorescence in the at this depth. So I was like, oh, thank God. So that was huge relief from there, and we knew that we had something viable. But in amongst that were periods of just absolute agony from an emotional perspective, because it felt like we were getting nowhere, particularly when we were taking all of those losses. We hadn't had anything promising. The equipment that we had wasn't functioning properly, and it felt at some stage like we were drilling 3 different wells based on the data that we were getting: mud gas, gamma ray, and LWD resistivity in the top of the 8.5 inch hole. So that was spent a lot of my time firefighting, trying to get stuff fixed instead of rather than being able to kind of analyze the data and be confident in it. We couldn't hang our hat on anything. That was the frustrating bit when we were drilling, is we didn't know what was ground truth. The only thing that we knew that was ground truth was the cuttings. Everything else just didn't make sense. But look, frontier basin, you've got no reference point, so it's hard to, it's hard to sort of feel where you're going. But also probably the hard part about it is that everything comes in real time, and you can, a lot of sleepless nights looking at the phone, watching drilling TV and the real time data coming in, and it's an agonizing way to, you just, because you don't know what section you're going to drill through and what's coming next, and there's always this, is it just around the corner? So really, really difficult period, but some very, very, elated moments where things finally started to look promising. And then we had motor failures and resistivity tool failures again, and we drilled through, and then we logged it and got some good results, and then had some frustrations with the sampling tools, waiting because we mobilized a different type of tool based on what we'd seen, and then deepening the well, and we continued to see fluorescence and gas. Stewart's retirement obviously thrown in there, and an AGM, and then the decision to sidetrack was also quite hard. It's not something that you do lightly, but we'd seen enough promise, and the reason that we did it was because of we had some issues getting pre-tests in some of these sections, which looked very good, and it didn't make sense. Good porosity, good saturation values based on the wireline logs, but we couldn't get any pre-tests out of it. So we decided to shoot the VSP and then cut the sidewall cores. And when the sidewall cores came out and we saw the mud cake layer on it caused by the heavy mud weight and the high barite content, we knew why. And so we knew we were going to have a hard time. We tried to ream it out and break down the mud cake against the wall, and that didn't work. We didn't see any of the filter cake being returned over the shakers. So we knew if we were going to get a sample, we would have to drill a sidetrack and go into some clean hole section and with a lower solids mud, and that's what we decided to do. And then again, a frustrating time trying to kick off, pour cement jobs where we'd start to kick off and then we'd just lose the cement and the drill bit would slide 20 meters sometimes before we get to the next solid bit of cement. And so, again, a lot of frustration with the sidetrack, and we battled. We had a top drive issue. What else happened? Oh, so many, so many things went wrong. And I thought at one stage we weren't going to be able to even kick off the sidetrack and drill that, and that would have been also pretty poor. And eventually that worked. Drilled through it, and we saw a lot better drilling performance in the sidetrack as well. And then again managed to get the primary logs down, no problem whatsoever. And then issues with the sampling tools again, and that was hard to stomach, because we knew that we were so close, and we based on what we'd seen, we should be able to get some samples, and it just didn't happen. And so that was a very, very difficult kind of acceptance. And when eventually we had to make the call, where we've done all of these things, we're having these issues with our service provider and the reliability of tools, the competence of people, their interest in fixing things that aren't going right. And the borehole had started to break down again because it'd been open for such a long time, water-based mud. And it became a point of, we've got the primary logs, we know what's there in the rocks. We can't get a sample, but an unknown amount of time for how long it was going to take to repair the sampling tools and when it would arrive. And based on previous guidance that we had for of when we eventually got tools there, and when they told us they would be there, we knew it was not going to be quick. In which case it probably would have collapsed in on us, and we would have planted. We were lucky that we got that tool out, because that's about $4.5 million worth. That is completely complete waste of money in terms of planting a tool and not being able to recover it. It's that's just salt in the wounds. So we had to make an adult decision as to this is not working. It's not working with our service provider. It's not working in the current hole conditions, and we've got what we need from a log perspective. We can't meet the discovery criteria with the sample, but we've seen enough that we're happy from a petroleum systems point of view perspective. I'll use the discovery perspective here as well, and that there are hydrocarbons in the rocks. Would it be nice to be able to have that confirmed, and we'd be sitting here having a completely different conversation, obviously. But we had to make an adult decision to stop because it wasn't working. Coming up into the height of the rainy season, and so we needed to come back, reassess, and regroup, and do it again. So that was a very, very hard decision to make, but in the end, I think we made the right decision. In hindsight, could we have suspended it and come back and flow tested it? Perhaps. The whole conditions that we saw when we were doing the P&A had deteriorated even further. We had we had to push the packer elements all the way down to the bottom of the hole because we couldn't strip them. We had to push them down with the drill bit. And the 202 rig from a hook load perspective is relatively small. It's 475,000 pounds. So if you start to get your liner stuck, your casing stuck, again, you just sometimes throwing good money after bad. Could we have done it? Yeah, from a percentage point of view, maybe 50-50, but 50-50 decisions in this game can end up biting you and costing you an inordinate amount of time and money. So we thought it best to have a pause, learn some lessons, come back for the next campaign in a better position. Fortunately, in the background, we managed to negotiate an extension with Exalo for the 202 rig to keep it on, keep it warm stacked, and that meant that the pressure of trying to demob a rig at the same time as all the services was put off. And from an economic point of view, we can keep the rig stacked for 18 or so months and be cost neutral versus demobbing and remobbing. So that again was a straightforward decision, and Exalo were more than happy. It allows them to do some maintenance and upgrades, particularly to the mud system. And we save all the hassle of, we had a difficult time with the mobilization from Tanzania, and having to send it there and then get it back from Tanzania, which was our obligation, was again something that from an effort and time point of view is very consuming. So we've taken that off the table. Fortunately, from a cost perspective, it's roughly neutral for 18 months. We should be ahead of that by that stage, and we get a better upgraded rig. And in the meantime, I can concentrate on the drilling program, the well design, services, etc. So overall, it's been a mix. And over the last few years as well, though, it's been hard. The highs and lows. My family shared all of this with me, and they've had a front row seat, and that's also taken its toll over a period of time. We're out here by ourselves. We don't have any family support in Australia, so it's just my wife and I and the two kids, and that I'm kept away on the road for long periods, and when I'm not at work, I'm consumed by work and thinking about it. So that's also, I think, been something that now be more conscious of, trying to build a team so that not everything falls on my shoulders. Stressful period during that phase, because Stuart had basically checked out by early September with what was going on with him. So all of that kind of all fell on me, and all of the decision making of what we were going to do. So it was a stressful period, and I think in the pre-drill, some of my pre-drill commentary was, this is going to be fun. It's exciting drilling wells. It is exciting, but certainly one of the most stressful periods I've ever been through, because of what was riding on the result from a success or failure point of view, from a reputational point of view for me and for the company. I pinned myself firmly to this, to the outcome of what had happened by deciding to solve risk and solve fund through our shareholders, obviously. But it's a lot to fall on one person's shoulders. So I felt probably accentuated highs and lows during that campaign. But, looking back at it, we've had some time to digest the results and look at it in the cold hard daylight, and some of them, and some of the things we would do differently and will do differently for the next campaign, and other things, it's part of drilling in a frontier basin where you never know what you're going to encounter, and you have to adapt. And it's as they say, no battle plan survives first contact, and being adaptable. You've got to certainly be able to do that in a remote location where you can't swap things in and out very easily. You've got to battle through, stick with it, do the best you can, and try and get to the end and get the results that you're looking for. So sorry, I've rambled on for a long time there.
No, that's perfect. I think that a lot of people are wanting to hear exactly what you're talking about, right? Because I think people really do this. As I'm going to echo a comment made in the chat here, but yeah, people really do appreciate your candidness, Scott, right? That you're rather forthcoming in your conversations. You're not just kind of giving us legal speak or kind of speaking like a politician without too much concretely said. So yeah, we appreciate that. I mean, when you talk about it being all consuming and a huge kind of contrasting mix of emotions, I'm feeling that as an investor half a world away, and I'm not the guy who's been doing this for 13 years of his life and, like you say, pinned his entire life to it, right? And here you are, 1 yard away from the end zone kind of thing, and just kind of getting stymied, right? So no, I think everyone here is I mean, this is a fairly friendly chat, I'd say. Everyone here is rooting for you, and we appreciate just the fact that you take your time to actually be kind of human and honest with us. I have two different strands here that I'd like to touch on. One, I want to talk about, I guess, what you think of the results versus what the market made of them. But maybe let's just put a pin in that and come back to those. I mean, so sure. You referenced this previously. You talked about lessons learned from Mukuyu-1 and the sidetrack. Could you maybe just, clarify that? I mean, what lessons are you bringing with you to the next spud, to the next drill? What are you changing? What changes for you based on these results so that maybe next time is more positive than it is frustrating?
Sure. So look, we've obviously learned a huge amount just from a subsurface point of view. The geology of these various horizons that we've penetrated, what to expect. And I mean, we saw some of that being implemented already with the sidetrack, and we had certainly a better drilling performance once we'd kicked off through with the drilling of the sidetrack in terms of the speed. Didn't take any losses through the pebbly arcos because the mud weight was lower. From a geology perspective, as I said, we will now have a much better well design in place of where to set our casing points, and drill bit selection. Again, you don't know what the rocks are going to be like when they're in the subsurface versus what they're at surface. So we've got a much better, we've got calibration now for the rock hardness, the types of rocks we've encountered, and all that data that we've gathered, we'll be able to go and analyze now to pick bits, casing points. The log data will help in calibrating the seismic and also will help in our volumetric estimates. And then from an actual drilling side of things, again, some of the crew was green and hadn't done this before, particularly on a lot of the floormen. We're all local, all from the local community, but they had an outstanding attitude and learned very, very quickly. And we've successfully completed a well in a frontier location as an operator without any input from any JV partners. And typically we'd have bigger partners that would be policing and gold plating everything. We had no incidents. So from a safety perspective, that worked very well. But I think having the right partners in terms of service companies and ones that are more engaged, I think certainly the rationale for why we brought them on and the structure of the contract was correct, but there's obviously a lot that we would change now going forward. So insisting on we did, and the people that were supplied to us some of them were very good. Some of them left a lot to be desired, directional drillers that couldn't directional drill. We had, and this is an industry-wide problem at the moment. It's not unique to us. There's a lot of issues with the service sector at the moment because of there's been a lot more activity, and two, a lot of the good people have left the service industry because they were laid off, and during COVID, a lot of them aren't coming back, or will only come back under specific conditions. We haven't reached that yet. I think from a logistics point of view, certainly we've learned a tremendous amount about what works, what doesn't. I think from an operational perspective, we've now got a better handle on how specific sections will drill, from a speed, an ROP, rate of penetration point of view, where the tricky bits are, what we need to look out for, and also which horizons we need to focus on too. So this well design, which was deviated, was designed to try and hit as many targets as we could, because we didn't know how many goes we'd get at this. Certainly if we didn't find anything, it's unlikely we'd be drilling any more wells in the basin. And so that means that you don't want to have any regret of, well, if we focused on this one and you'd seen something that was maybe off structure or residual, and you think, well, if we drill this in a better location, we would have had a different result. So we didn't want to have any regrets about not hitting some targets. So certainly I think a simpler well design for the next round of drilling, and we'll be in a much, much better position overall.
Maybe I'll just ask, so new service provider, obviously you're not going to announce anything right now, but could you maybe just tell us, as much as you can in generalities, where you are in that process and when the market might expect an update?
Sure. So we've had conversations with them already, and they've been following our campaign as well and been engaged. I think one of the difficulties when we went out to tender for the first campaign, the logistics aspect was unknown. Things were still pretty tough. We went out for the tender in, I think, September 21 for services, maybe earlier than that. I think we'd had some conversations before that, and so we got a lot of ordinary bids because service companies don't want to underbid, and then you're facing an unknown logistics aspect which can rack up pretty quickly. So a lot of them, the bid for the services and the rentals for the equipment was okay, but the logistics aspect was ludicrous, the markups that were on that. So they priced themselves out of contention. So now with this round of tenders, obviously we can point people to exactly what's required. A lot of it we can handle ourselves, and we ended up having to handle ourselves as well, because that's the only way it would have got done. If we kept on relying on our service provider, we would have never gotten a lot of things that we needed, and that were necessary, and we had we still had delays because of the tardiness. So that process has started. Generally speaking, they need a number of weeks to respond to tenders, and then it's the availability of equipment, and some things are in more short supply than others, particularly things like wireline tools, LWD, that's in short supply at the moment, industry-wise, because they haven't made any new tools since probably since the 14-15 period prior to the previous downturn, and they've been junking a lot of stuff and not manufacturing new tools. Industry just started to pick up again in 18 or 19, and then COVID came along in 2020 and stymied that. So they're only just kind of getting around to doing it now. So again, previously where there were more than enough tools available, they put them on boats. Now they won't put them on boats because there's a shortage of them, and you've got to fly them everywhere. So that's become a more expensive endeavor as well. They want them in being productive, and they also want to minimize that transit time that they have. So that's become harder to secure tools. And now you're competing globally for a lot of stuff, where particularly LWD, which goes to the US, which is used there, not so much from wireline. So we had to fly tools in from Houston to utilize in our drilling campaign. So it's not, you don't have the big regional bases available to us like you do in Australia, like you do in the Middle East and in North America. We've got Africa, and particularly Southern Africa, is a lesser focused region because of the lower amount of activity. Typically, they've got to beg and borrow from other regions to get exactly what you need. So being more prepared this time, we know exactly what we need, and but they've got to now look at their availability and the scheduling of what they've committed to, which will dictate really when we can drill again. So once we get responses, then we can give the market an update, because that's really what's going to be dictating our timeframes.
Okay, so yeah, and still very much kind of fluid situation under negotiation, so no real timelines there to provide. Yeah.
And look, probably also adding to that is with the new board that's come in, we want to run through the strategy and the rationale of what's coming through, have their buy-in or suggest alternatives, so that we can, we're all going with an endorsed plan back to our shareholders.
Mm-hmm. I might just jump around. This is a couple pages ahead here, but LWD, is that something you might anticipate for the next drill?
Well, we did have LWD, and we had it planned. So the LWD that we had was for gamma ray and resistivity. So gamma ray allows you to differentiate between shale and sand, and resistivity on your fluid content in your reservoir. So that was the plan. We had a failure of the primary tool in the 12.25, and the backup wasn't at the well site when we were told it was. So when that happened, we said, look, we've got the 8.5-inch hole coming up. So then we had to actually handhold and say, right, we're running casing. Once we finish this 12.25-inch hole, have you got everything for the casing? Have you got everything for the cementing job? Have you got everything for the wireline? And then for the 8.5-inch, what have you got primary backup? Where is it? And they said, oh, well, we've got all that stuff, and the backup for the 8.5-inch resistivity is coming. So we said, okay, well, where is it? Oh, it's being used in Mexico at the moment. And so he said, okay, well, we need to have a look at the timing for mobilizing the backup, because there's no point in mobilizing it, paying the mobilization charge and the rental if it's not going to arrive in time. And so that's what ended up happening, where by the time it would have been mobilized, we would have finished drilling that section, and it nearly worked out that way. The primary tool worked from the top of the 8.5-inch hole down to where we saw that first gas show that we announced in the fluorescence, and then it had a mechanical issue. One of the sleeves on the outside had worn away, and we couldn't run it again. And then we only had another 500 meters or so to drill. So it was nearly okay, but then it wouldn't have been available for the deeper section and then for the sidetrack, and by that stage it had then gone somewhere else. So we did have LWD planned, but LWD tools are very expensive from a rental perspective, and if you're getting anything more sophisticated than gamma ray and resistivity, if you're going to density and neutron, that's very expensive. And then if you're going to fluid sampling, tools like stethoscope and which is the Schlumberger, I can't remember what the Baker one's called, those are hellish expensive to run, and we didn't know what we were going to encounter. And so running those tools, having them on rental and on standby for the very first well that you drill in the basin is aggressive from a strategy and a financial perspective. And as we always said, your primary evaluation method is through wireline. because you get much LWD. The resolution that you get is over, it's average over a 2 meter, roughly sort of interval. Whereas wireline for some of the tools, you're talking centimeters. So the resolution of the data that you get from wireline is what you need from an evaluation perspective. LWD will give you some information, but you're not building the stuff back into your models and into your analysis. You really need that high resolution wireline data, which is always always what you're going to go and get. And we did get a very good primary log suite of gamma ray, resistivity, density, neutron, and resistivity. So from that perspective, that data gathering was fine. It was really the fluid sampling that let us down. So you can go in with a more aggressive LWD, but at the end, we're going to get the same data from the wireline and better resolution and a more cost-effective manner. So that's the route that we chose to go. From a future wireline perspective, we're probably then adding more sophisticated and more bespoke tools like FMI or formation image log, and then also potentially things like NMR, your nuclear magnetic resonance tool, which gives you it's a different porosity measurement, and free fluid and bound fluid. So again, these are things now that we've had the success that we're more confident going into, and we know exactly why we're using them. And it's not just, there are a lot of tools that you can throw at data acquisition programs that won't really deliver value for money at the end of the day. And that's what we were trying to do with the first campaign. Make sure that we got the right data set, but do it in a cost-effective manner.
How close were you? This is just a brief question here. How close were you to budget? Obviously, with the sidetrack, I'm going to guess initial budget got exceeded, but where were you with that? Do you have a number how much that it cost in total?
Yeah, so pre-sidetrack, we were tracking pretty well. I think if you follow the number of days that we said we would drill the primary well in and where it came in, we were on budget from there. It was a sidetrack that exceeded the budget. That's on paper. Where we end up in reality, there's still some disputes to be had for some of these things, and certainly we're not going to be paying full tote for a lot of the services that weren't provided.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's always a fun conversation too, I'm sure. So why don't we transition here to Mukuyu-1, to the results? I mean, I guess this is not sure how to structure this or frame this, but I mean, I guess, is there anything that you want to talk about? I mean, when you saw the market's response, obviously you can expect, I think the term you used in previous discussions was a dream deferred, right? I think that remains a fairly accurate statement so far. Short-term punters, right? They'll be off and moving on to the next shiny thing, right? But I mean, do you think that the market is appreciating what's there, or can you kind of speak to a discrepancy between what you think is there or what you understand versus what the market understands, or what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So look, I think there has been a fundamental misunderstanding of what we found and of the results, and I think that was reflected in the share price response when we came out early in the year with essentially with the final result or stating that we couldn't continue with the fluid sampling. So people have interpreted this as us not finding anything, and I've heard words like duster used, and couldn't be further from the truth. So what's happened is we've got the primary logs that show hydrocarbons in the rocks. Doesn't matter what petrophys parameters you use, you can't kill that. We had fluorescence, 100% fluorescence. We had elevated mud gas, the cuttings, isotubes, the gas chromatograph, and showing that lined up with what the cuttings we were seeing and the shows that we had, reservoir intervals, wireline logs. So there are hydrocarbons in the rocks. That is unequivocal and not up for debate. Quite frankly, if you ask anyone to look at the logs, they'll tell you that. What we had was a failure of equipment that didn't allow us to extract a fluid sample to surface. Probably let me explain it this way. From a discovery point of view, you have to prove movable hydrocarbons, right? The way that you do that is through a well test or through a wireline formation sample that you gather, where you physically pull them out of the rocks and bring them to surface. We've got hydrocarbons. We couldn't prove that they were movable because of failure of the wireline formation testing tool. So that's where I think the misunderstanding has come, where it's not a geological issue. This is a tool issue.
Yeah, and it's just such a tantalizingly close thing, right? Can you? I mean, does this, based on the information that Mukuyu-1 provided to you, are you in a position that you can update the chance of success numbers, or is that a work in progress, or what's missing for that to maybe change?
Well, from a chance of success number for Mukuyu-1, that's one. That's 100%. So if we're talking about in the Upper Angwa, 100%. If we're talking in the Pebbly Arcos, we've had some hydrocarbons migrate through there. We've got some residual saturation in some of those units. From a forest point of view, we saw very little reservoir at that particular location. And from a Dandy point of view, again, we had that result in the 200 where it looks like we've got hydrocarbons on the rocks, but we've got some very funky mineralogy associated with the fault plane and where we are in that location. So again, trap works, reservoir's good. Looks like we've got saturation in there. It's reservoir quality and effectiveness at that location. So the chance of success, though, going forward from an appraisal perspective, we haven't done the maths yet. I guess you can look at it from where in the previous announcement that we made on an update of the results, where we've kind of looked at a postmortem of where we were pre-drill for all those elements and where we are post-drill. Source rock perspective, fantastic source rock that we penetrated and lots of it. Seal, I think that's now, if you look at your chance factors, that's now at 100, where we are very effective. Seal, reservoir, again, it's present and in most of those units and in the Upper Angwa, it's called the alternations, remember, because you've got these alternating cycles of source, seal, and reservoir. So we've got 11 intervals that we had and they're roughly sort of mega or super cycles of about 100 meters each, where you go from the one unit to the top of the one unit to the base, and then you get into the next cycle. So those would be different in the different horizons. So that's where we're going to in Mukuyu-2. In the Upper Angwa, that our chance of success now, I don't think anyone, from an appraisal perspective, it's still not 100%, obviously. There's still risk associated with it. But certainly those other elements now have been dramatically upgraded. And going into this pre-drill, source, the source quality and presence, we mapped it and sampled it at outcrop. That was probably anywhere between 40 and 60 kilometers away. So that's quite a long distance then to say, well, we've got it over here and it's going to be 40 kilometers away, and we can say that with certainty. Well, we've now proven that, and what we're seeing at outcrop does continue. And then the same with seal, that we didn't see a lot of seal at outcrop, but we've seen a lot of it in the subsurface, and that's where it counts. So that's and then trap, obviously we've got traps all over the basin, and that's okay. It's the containment that we were always worried about, and that was the seal effectiveness. And with the amount of faulting that you can see on the seismic, there was a concern that even if it did generate hydrocarbons, if it migrated into the reservoir, you had this upthrust which has now opened up these faults, and potentially it's all leaked and migrated away. But we've proven that's not the case either. So certainly from a chance of success perspective of where we were looking at in some of these horizons, which were in the low teens, pre-drill, that's probably gone up. But again, I'll let my geos and our independent people do it. I won't give you a number, but it's certainly well north of where we were pre-drill.
No, yeah, that's totally acceptable and exciting for sure. I guess another kind of similar question here, just coming from people that are asking, will you be releasing net pay numbers once the data is processed, even if there is a margin of error involved with that? And then potential timeline or expectation of when that might be, if yes.
Yeah, so the samples have just arrived at the lab now. We've actually got a session this afternoon with them. And that took a long time to get the export permits granted, and we were waiting for the sidetrack to be completed with the cuttings, so we could send everything in one go. And then we ran into Christmas and New Year period, and trying to get anything from a government department for export permits over that period is near on impossible. So that's finally arrived now. So I think also it's still going to be a little while, depending on what analysis we're talking about. So some stuff you'll get quickly. We've got a range of analysis that we'll be conducting. So we've got the reservoir samples that we gathered. So I think there's roughly, or maybe 8 or 10 samples of reservoir. And remember, we're looking at a core plug that's say 4 or 5 centimeters long, maybe 3 centimeters in diameter, and that's one point along a wellbore that is, in the 8.5-inch section is 1,500 meters. So it'll provide us with some calibration, but it's not going to solve everything because it's just one point. And even if you take a reservoir interval, if it's 10 or 20 meters, whatever the case is, you've just got one little plug along that point to calibrate your logs on. So it'll give us some information and maybe swing it over, but that will still take a long time to pin down. But we'll be able to get other things, the electrical measurements from it, porosity, permeability, at least get some handle on it. Certainly better informed than what we are now. And it will allow us to have some conservative net numbers. Again, we can't over-egg this, and I've always been of the opinion that you should be building from a conservative base and going up, rather than throwing a huge big Hail Mary out there and trying to get to that point and you're always reaching. I think some companies that we've seen put out very aggressive numbers and they never reach them. Then your independent resource estimators come along, and the big internal numbers that you put out all of a sudden are half or a third of what you've been telling the market, and then you look like a muppet. So that's not what we're about. So we'll have some clarity from the cycle cores, but again, it's a very, very small sample set based on, we've got 11 reservoir intervals out of that section, excluding the stuff that was deeper when we deepen the well down to 3,900 meters. There are another, I think, 3 or 4 reservoir units in there. So we're not going to have a calibration for everything. We're going to have a calibration for some of the high graded points that we picked. But with the cuttings that we've got, and with the cycle cores for the source intervals that we picked, that'll give us a lot of information on the source rock quality, because that's more of there's less variation in that, and you can infer it on a much wider scale than a single log point, because you're looking at its generation capacity, at its total organic content, vitrinite reflectance. So that kind of stuff will get a lot more useful information out of. And we've got to age date these things as well. I mean, it's just been hypothetical what age these rocks are. And now we've got some subsurface data, and we'll be able to get some palynology and some of the bugs and plant information out of it to give it a proper age. And that will then help us calibrate our basin model and figure out where the oil that's been generated has gone. So there has been oil generated in this basin, and we always thought there would be. So we've seen that fluorescence, and we think potentially we've seen a paleo contact in the original wellbore, because we saw higher gas content in the sidetrack, which was slightly up dip, versus what we saw, and less lower liquids contact versus what we saw in the mother-bore. So that's also been quite an interesting revelation. And maybe we've picked that spot on the seismic, and that's what's showing us in that location. But again, these are just early sort of thoughts. So we'll have that lab data, and the various things take a bit of time depending on what analysis that you're doing on them. So again, back to the reservoir samples, we'll be able to get some. These are the big boy cores, the max cores. So we'll be able to do spatial core analysis on them, which will give us saturation data and those sorts of things, which will help back up the saturation estimates as well. So that's been good that we've got those big sidewall cores, because with the standard ones, you can't do spatial core analysis on them. And with percussions, so these are the mechanical ones that we cut out of the rocks rather than you shoot them and pull them out, which tends to crush the grains, and they're pretty poor for anything but just looking at and having a gander. So yeah, that'll filter in over the next weeks and months, but you've got to do them in a specific order, because you've got to wash them and clean them and prep them for that analysis, and you don't alter their native state too much either. We'll also get hydrocarbon extracts out of some of the middle points of the plugs, which haven't been as exposed and drifted away. So we'll be able to calibrate what's in the source, what we see in the reservoir, along with the mud gas isotopes as well that we've collected. So there's a lot of analysis to come. It doesn't all happen overnight, though. I know people are anxious and eager to learn more. But the main data suite that we've got from this is the wireline data.
Yeah, no, thank you. Very exciting, and yeah, just a challenging moment here. But I'll pass it off to Jamie here. We're just starting to talk about geology, and that's where I start to be a little bit more useless than I usually am. So I'll pass it off to Jamie here. Jamie, if you want to take it over from here and ask some more technical questions.
I'll try. Yeah, you mentioned the core sampling. So you took samples in the reservoir. You mentioned the source rock intervals.
Mm-hmm.
How many? You took 8 to 10 in the reservoir. How many did you take in the source rock? Is it considerably more? Or this kind of
no, yeah, I think we cut 24 overall. We recovered 24 out of 27, which is pretty good from a performance point of view, and statistically, sometimes you do have a lot of issues cutting sidewall cores, and you get poor recoveries out of them. I think we've roughly got a similar number for source, and then some for seal and some other interesting things where we don't quite know what they are based on the log data and the cuttings data, and those are not academic, but just to understand what they are, and some of it will be useful for both age dating, particularly the source intervals, and paleontology.
That's one of my main questions on the rocks really was what kind of, do you have any sense on what deposition environments these are? Marine versus non-marine broadly, or? Yeah,
so we're an interior basin, so there's no marine, or certainly not that we've seen or ever thought to see. So this is all the primary depositional environments, and depends what horizon we're talking about now. But you're looking at generally fluvial deltaic, paludial, so swampy environment. That's where we get a lot of the source rock from, and lacustrine as well. So we've seen all of that amongst the the various horizons that we're talking about. So
and then you've taken by stratigraphic samples or stuff for palynology?
We have. So the stuff at the surface is sometimes hard to date, just because it's weathered, and all the bugs that and plant material that you use to date it has been eroded away. So we have got both the cuttings and also some some of the sidewall cores, and we'll use the trim ends when we prepare them to go and do that. So that'll also help us get a handle on the timing of when each of these horizons was formed, from its evolution in the basin, timing the uplift, and timing of generation and charge from the source rock as well. That's all information that we'll be able to get now and calibrate our basin models, because up until we drilled, this is all academic, and all just modeling of what had happened, and a lot of different hypotheses. So now we will be able to calibrate that in a much more definitive way, and that will help us. As I mentioned, we've got some oil that's been generated, and it's been in the structure, and we'll now be able to try and figure out where it's gone up dip, whether that's gone to the basin margin play or further to the east, or if it's a little bit down dip, which we think it may be as well in some of these reservoir units. That's all going to help us now and get a much better calibration on the history of the basin.
Okay. So you think you encountered the source rocks that are giving you the oil, or those could be, in the lower Angler perhaps, or a mixture, I guess?
Yeah, we think it's a mixture. So we always, again, this is pre-drill, the basin modeling that we've done suggested that it was generating present day on structure and in the oil window. But talking to our petroleum systems modeler, she believes that a lot of this charge has come in laterally as well. But again, a combination of the mud gas isotubes that we've got and the source rock that we've got will help us determine where it's come from, whether it's lateral migration, whether it's self-sourcing, because we've got some quite high carbonaceous content in these source rocks that we've seen. A lot of collie sections in there as well. So again, an indication of the depositional environment being kind of paludial and lacustrine, much thicker source rock intervals than we modeled before. So again, that's a good thing. And we still got the down dip, or the not down dip, but remaining upper angler that we didn't penetrate in this well, because it was thicker than we expected. So again, all of this will help us calibrate that story and determine. And the charge history is, I think I mentioned it in our in the results webinar, is quite complicated, because it has been through the oil generation window, into the gas generation window, back up into the oil generation window, and had multiple phases of charge. And so that that again, we'll be able to get a much better handle on once we get all these results in.
Is your kind of primary target the Angua still, like for follow-up drilling in Mukuyu?
Yeah, and we've always, this has always been our primary target from day dot. And if you go right back to the beginning, one of our primary hypothesis about this basin of why it was different to the other Permo-Triassic basins and Karoo basins in the region, and why we've always liked it, is because of the upper Angua and the presence of source rock in the Triassic. And that's what's been a big difference in where you've made discoveries and where you haven't. And this is played out now where we are. So the analogs that we were throwing up prior to drilling were in Madagascar, where you've had the big onshore discoveries there. You've got Belamanoga, which are the tar sands, which are several billion barrels. Cimarora, the heavy oil field, which has been developed by Madagascar Oil, that's around 1 billion barrels or so. And then if you go further north, you get to, so this is in the Morondava Basin. If you get into the Mandaza 1 well that Shell drilled, that's light oil and gas. So we think it's from an age perspective, you're in the Sokoa, which is equivalent in the Permian to Amakanga, and then you've got the Sakamina age, or the Sakamina interval, again similar to the upper Angua, and then you've got the Asalo sandstones, which is, again, we've got a very, very good comparison now with Madagascar, and presence of heavier ends and also lighter, depending on where you are from a thermal maturity point of view of the source rock. And then the other one was Ethiopia as well in the Ogaden, which again is the box shales in the Triassic, which is the source there. So that's what we've always liked. Most of the other basins in the Karoo don't have that Triassic source rock interval, and that's why they haven't worked. You've got some smaller Permian coal charged gas intervals, but nothing really that's kind of stood out commercially. So this has always been our focus on the primary target for us, because you've got that Triassic source.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the cyclicity in the alternations member, because that's something you could maybe play around with across the basin once you get a handle on the packages. Going back to the core, you mentioned that you do have actual oil samples contained within the core. I guess they were wrapped when you took the cores.
So we should have
oil.
No, it's not produced oil. So those will be the remnants that are in the sidewall cores, and they're being wrapped immediately, so that we can preserve that. And we should still have some left in that pore space. So once they are, so we're trying to obtain those extracts out of the core to then tie back to the source rock and what we've seen from the mud gas isotubes and everything else. So
okay. Kind of finally on the geology part of Mukuyu-1, did you encounter any kind of igneous intrusions or anything? They're kind of, you get them in the Karoo kind of region, I guess. Did you encounter any drilling?
No, so no intrusions whatsoever, and there aren't many around in the basin. There's a handful of them in the east, which is Jurassic age and similar to some of the other basalts that you see further west in the mid-Zambezi basin. But again, one of the reasons that we always rated this basin is because of the lack of intrusives in it, which typically alter your thermal gradients, can affect your reservoir quality, and also take up a bit of your sedimentary pile. So this basin is, from a sedimentary point of view, one of the deepest going around. It's got 12 to 16 kilometers of sedimentary fill in it, without any intrusives in the fairway that we're playing in. So we've always, and we can't see really any on seismic either. So we don't, we don't get the seismic signatures. Just right where the basin starts to outcrop in the east, we've got the Jirema basalt, as it's called, which is a little bit over the surface, but not much. But yeah, not from a.
Moving on to the geophysics side, you mentioned that you took a VSP in the well. Was that did you do the whole well before you sidetracked, or just part of it?
No, so we didn't do the deeper section when we drilled ahead because we couldn't get the logging tools down below 3,000 meters. So we did basically the entire 8.5-inch section and the majority of the 12.25, because we had cement. So we basically did it to top of cement in the 12.25.
Yeah.
But we've got velocity data. and sonic data from the logs from in the 12.25 and 8.5.
So given that in my interpretation is you found kind of a lot more shale in the well, or you said that yourself. So what impacts is that going to have on the velocity model? You've got to speed everything up, which pushes stuff up and down,
It does. So again, going into this pre-drill, the conventional wisdom from all the academics who looked at this basin and some other commentators always said that there's so much sand in this basin that there's no seal around. Containment and is going to be your biggest issue. So even if you do have seal, how widespread is it? How effective is it? And with the uplift that you can see and the faulting in the seismic, there's no ways that this is going to hold together. And we saw a lot of seal in this basin and very, very effective. So what we've seen at outcrop and look, it's hard to calibrate at outcrop because a lot of it's buried under this quaternary cover, sort of 50-meter thick Kalahari sand, and it only gets exposed in the riverbeds that cut through and wash that away, and you get that exposure. So we see some seal at surface, and we've got cap rock measurements and everything else, but we'd see more reservoir at surface than we had seal, but often that gets eroded away as well compared to reservoir. So certainly more seal in this basin than we expected, but again, that was our primary risk going into this. So that's now been, essentially removed. But it will now help us now that we've got sonic data and VSP data, very detailed from the wireline. That'll then help us calibrate our seismic, because we were just doing it as these big packages over, and basically using the seismic data and average velocities over those intervals, rather than very, very detailed discrete packages that we've now been able to log and know what's what. So again, it's from the data that we had available to us pre-drill versus what we have post-drill are completely different.
I guess the burning question is, what are the next steps? Are you you mentioned acquiring 3D seismic data before drilling the next well. Is that still the plan, or would you do maybe some more 2D to infill, or what's the plan with the seismic versus the next spud, I guess?
Yeah, so we're looking at 3D for Mukuyu, as well as the infill 2D to the east. I think I've mentioned before we ran out of time and money, and we were sole risking it at that stage, and we didn't have title. We were still doing this dance with government on this acreage expansion, and it was supposed to be done before we started shooting, and then whilst we were shooting and it didn't get done, it became too risky to spend more money without that certainty of title. But anyway, we got there in the end. So we see some really nice leads in the east, Masumu, Mopani, and Macabel, that have these quite extensive flat spots that we see. They're shallower, less faulted. So those look, and it's a continuation of the play type in that central fairway that's been proven up by Mukuyu. So we're debating as to whether we shoot 3D on Mukuyu, and then with the benefit of that 3D, then go and drill Mukuyu 2. Do we just go and drill it without 3D as is, or do we shoot some more 2D in the east and drill one of those and try to extend the play a little bit further, or do we go to the basin margin and open up a brand new play with Baobab or one of the others, the other prospects that we have along the basin margin? So there's a few things kind of, and a few options swirling around at the moment, which is a good thing. We're not pigeonholed into doing one thing and only got one thing to shoot at, essentially, and that's because we've got a big portfolio of prospects and leads and different play types as well, which is a luxury when you're in a junior and got the running room and control of the basin. So again, once we get everyone bedded down from a board perspective and having an exploration manager as well join the team, and again, that's to help focus on the technical aspects and take some of that burden away from me, so it can get the time and attention that it needs, because I've become a bit of a bottleneck in the company where everything is getting fed through me, and some decisions are taking longer than they should be, because there's a lot of competing things from a time perspective for me, juggling corporate stuff, technical stuff, government relations, PAC, etc. So
is the seismic something you could do regardless of the kind of well activities, and that you could commit to doing the seismic surveys, and also it's not contingent on the seismic to drill the next well? That's kind of my point. Does that make sense?
No, I mean, you don't have to have seismic to drill a well. Just ask.
Yeah, because you could just drill the well right next door to where you just drilled it, right?
We could. You could drill Mukuyu-1A, for example, 1X, or whatever your naming convention is. But I think to do that, we wouldn't gain any new information from the wireline. That would be purely just to go get a fluid sample. So we wouldn't learn anything new from a geology or geophysics perspective by drilling Mukuyu-1A in that sense. And so that's why now stepping out and going further away is, I think, is the right move. But again, we'll have this debate and get once the new board and everyone is bedded in this week, we've got a strategy session to decide, what the option is we're going to take forward. So it's important to have that.
Would stepping out require a new well site, or can you do this from the current well site that you have prepared?
No, we'd like to step out at least a couple of k's away. It's a big structure, so if we only step out from where we are and use the same pad, we're not going to get very far, and it'll take a long time to appraise Mukuyu in that fashion. So whether we stick on the southern flank where we are now, possibly, or we go over north to the next big fault block, again, that's stuff we've got to look at now, but we'll have a much better handle on it once the velocity data has been processed and being integrated back into the seismic, and we can start drawing some better conclusions from what the seismic looks like.
Once you have that data, are you going to look at doing a kind of revised resource estimate?
We could do. Again, this is just based on one single well, and whether it's going to change your resource estimates or not, I don't know. Is it a worthwhile exercise?
Did you see any fluid contacts in the well, like oil downseas or oil water gas kind of contacts?
We as I mentioned, I think potentially we've gone through a paleo oil contact in the motherboard, where we've seen a change in the fluorescence content, and also then in the saturation profile. And when we drilled up tip and went through that same reservoir, we didn't see as much fluorescence in there, and we saw higher gas content. So we think potentially that's been a paleo contact prior. We saw some sands that, again, with the lack of calibration we've got of our fluid data, with the resistivity, potentially we've got some low contrast light oil pay in some of these units, but without getting fluid gradients or samples, that's, we can't say. But certainly we had fluorescence through it, elevated resistivity, but not as much as what we saw in the gas zones. But nothing distinct from a contact point of view. But again, going back to the depositional environment of being fluvial, you're going to get these reservoir units that come and go, and then unlikely to be all connected as one big pool.
Well, that could be one benefit of a 3D survey, is imaging those channels, especially given that it appears to be a relatively kind of moderate net to gross system. So maybe the channels will stand out, and you can, that will tell you where to drill, build that picture for the basin of where the reservoir units are.
Yeah, exactly. Because we've had the outcrop and what we've seen there, and what we've seen in the well, and certainly there were more. It was more cyclical than we thought. If you look at all the literature, there were kind of 2 or 3 mega cycles of source and reservoir, and we saw probably smaller cycles, but more of them in the upper Angua. But again, we haven't seen the same probably high net to gross packages that we saw at outcrop either. So again, given the size of the structure, it's unlikely that we've penetrated this in the best spot with a first well. Almost certainly we haven't. And so that's also the thinking on the 3D and previous experience that we've had, and our team has had in these kind of depositional environments, is that with the 3D, at the moment we've just got vertical slices that we're looking at 2D, whereas from the 3D, once it's all put together, you can slice it horizontally, and that's where you can image the channels
you can make your attribute maps.
Exactly. So
you could also look at, I guess, the porosity. I think someone was asking about reservoir quality. 15% the kind of the best that you see, or is that the kind of mean? Or
no, so that was the best we saw in that upper Angua unit that had gas saturation. If you read the previous release that was made last week on the updated results, we've got some reservoir units that are 30% porosity in some of the shallower intervals, 20% of the Debiarcos. So there is some variation in the reservoir quality. Haven't seen in the upper Angua too much degradation of porosity with depth. And again, this is uncalibrated log data that we're looking at. But certainly you're going to get a variation in reservoir quality between your units, and depends on where you are in the channel system as well. If you're right in the middle and it's nice and clean with very little clay content, then your porosity is likely to be better than if you're on the edges and the fringes where it may be a little dirtier. So these are all things that we're going to learn once we get a look at the cycle cores under the microscope as well.
I had a question on essentially the weather. Do you have any information on what's going on there right now in terms of the rainy season, what surface conditions are like, or is everything kind of on hold right now?
So basically, so the rig has been. So we've taken down the mast. It's rainy season at the moment, and it's been a heavy rainy season this year. So we've taken down the mast because it's a huge lightning conductor, and we do have tropical thunderstorms that come into the area, and it's very, very flat, low relief, and so having something that's 54 meters tall in the valley does attract a lot of a high chance of this thing acting as a lightning rod. And in fact, you can see one of it's a stabilizer for the derrick, but also acts as the insulation in the background picture there. It was very muddy, and trying to demob the last bits of the services equipment a couple of weeks ago was very challenging. Luckily, we had a couple of the Vibrosize units there that are a little bit bigger that we were using as tow trucks to get them out of some of the mud baths just around the rig floor or around the base of the rig where there was a lot of activity. But we're only 1.5 km from the dirt road, from the tarred road. So once you're away from there, it's hard. It's fine. But there were a couple of sticky days there where it was tricky, and drilling through the rainy season and getting stuff in and out would have been a hard ask. Not impossible, and I mean it's done, but it's not ideal.
Do you have an update on the kind of long lead items? If they're secured, how long they will take to arrive, and also, are you buying enough just for another well, or are you gonna, money with no object? Obviously, you could buy enough for X number of wells, but do you have a number of wells in mind to order the equipment for, or just order just enough for the next one?
Yeah, so we, from a long lead perspective, we've got wellheads, we've got casing, enough for Baobab. If we would drill Mukuyu-1 as the next well in the sequence, we probably need to order a little bit more 9 5/8 inch casing, just because it is a little bit deeper than what the second well Baobab was. That's a sort of 2,000 odd meter well versus sort of 3,500. And then we've, probably the only things from a long lead perspective that we're missing would be mud and a little bit of cement. So those are, and we found suppliers for mud in South Africa, which we needed to during the drilling campaign. So that's quite easy. Cement, though, is a little trickier because it's specialist G-class cement that's got to come from and be API accredited. Typically, that comes from elsewhere. But again, these are smaller things to do. Casing and wellheads are typically the long lead things at the moment. Things with the longest lead time, I should say. And then from a number of wells perspective, again, that's something we're discussing from a strategy point of view, whether we drill 1 or 2. There's obviously benefits if you're doing it in a combined campaign. There's mobilization and demobilization aspects to it, and efficiency. But yeah, again, this is something that we've got to firm up from a strategy perspective with the board and the team as to whether it's going to be 1 or 2.
Am I right in thinking you were upgrading the rig to a synthetic mud system? So not fully oil-based, but kind of somewhere in the middle?
Possibly. And again, we need to have a look once the sidewall cores are done, and we've got some analysis done as to whether there's been any reactivity with the mud in some of these reservoir sections. So that will determine whether we go synthetic, and then again, it'll probably only be for specific sections rather than the full. So we probably displace to synthetic for the 8.5-inch section, or even specific reservoir intervals or geological units, I should say, as opposed to the whole thing, because it's synthetic mud's expensive. It's difficult to transport as well. It's got to come in drums versus sacks of it, and you're making it up. But the rig is upgrading the entire mud system. So the tanks, which we had issues with and couldn't start with because of the state of them and the wall thicknesses, so they're replacing those along with the agitation system, and the pumps are okay. So again, that'll help speed up the operations. Was one of the bottlenecks for us during the drilling.
Are there any other upgrades to the rig that you're thinking of, like the top drive system or repairs?
It's maybe, because it is possible, and I think the only thing we're concerned about is just the hook load, that it's able to. It's relatively light at 475,000. Fine for what we're doing at the moment, and if we're drilling more vertical wells in the future, it kind of negates that a bit. From the modeling we did pre-drill, we thought we'd get to 3,500 meters tops with this rig, with a torque and drag, with this deviation, but we got down to 3,900 and then ran out of drill pipe. So it did do better than expected, but it just becomes an issue if you get into problems with running casing or something, and you need a little bit more grunt to rotate it or pull it back if it's key seating or on a ledge, to try and either pull it back or force it through. That's where you're starting to get a little bit exposed. So again, these are things and discussions that we're having with Exalo.
Or Exalo kind of fronting some of that, given it's their rig, and they get to take it away with them at the end of the day. So
yeah,
they get to keep their
that's all for their account. So it's there's stuff that we've asked for, and that they volunteered the mud system because they saw it didn't perform, and they were fantastic. I must say they proactive, would get after anything that was wrong, sort out anything that needed fixing, and a very, very good attitude, and a pleasure to deal with. I mean, that rig contract amendment, we negotiated in a week to do it. Very, very simple and straightforward. So they're a pleasure to deal with.
Are they giving you a decent rate to warm stack it? Is there the option to cold stack the rig? Essentially take everyone off it, or?
Well, everyone is off. They're going to have a break now during the rainy season because there's not much they can do, and they're waiting for stuff to arrive. But as I mentioned earlier, we can warm stack this for 18 months, maybe a little bit longer, and be on a cost neutral basis versus what it would have taken us to demob it and then remobilize it back, and that's excluding all of the hassle as well. So it's been a good option. And it allows them to do all this maintenance and upgrades as well without the pressure of it, of trying to fulfill other drilling contracts and operations at the same time.
Okay. I think I'll hand back to Matthew for finance questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Just thank you, both of you guys. Just a quick follow-up, Scott. So, all right. So if I'm going to summarize here, based on weather and data and a team, we're not quite in a position where we can ask you for a game plan for the next 0, 6, or 12 months. So with that in mind, is there a schedule? When might the market expect an update for that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, look, relatively quickly. We've had discussions with both the new board members as to what we're thinking of in terms of forward strategy. We've already started the process for long leads and services, which we think is going to probably dictate the timing of when we'll be able to start again. So that won't take long. And from there, also we'll start having results and getting some insights from some of the core data and other data that we've gathered from the wells. So there'll be some news flow relatively quickly, both from a strategy point of view and then also some further results, which will help fill in some of the blanks.
And then just a couple more follow-ups here, if I don't mind, just quickly here, because I appreciate that, you know, we're taking up your time here. I don't want to belabor the point here, but you know, so from a layman's perspective, I mean, and it's again, but maybe this is why I'm asking for your input, because, you know, as a layman, obviously the things I don't know, but to me it screams, go make the discovery, right? And so when I'm intrigued when you talk about, you know, 3D seismic or moving a couple kilometers away or going east or to the basin margin and almost kind of just abandoning Mukuyu-1, not abandoning, but, you know, moving on for the time being. Do you mind just kind of filling us in, you know, just taking the opportunity to kind of giving us your thought process behind that?
Yeah, well, I guess it just comes down to we've got a lot of options in front of us. We're not forced to go and do one, you know, take one single path. So we, you know, again, is do we go straight to Mukuyu-2 now? We don't shoot 3D, then you know, we'll whether we'll have similar results or not, you know, we'd be better informed and expect to get a fluid sample out of the next one, certainly. But we need to make sure that we're spending money efficiently. We're not just drilling a well for the sake of drilling a well to satisfy people's desire for a hole in the ground. That's what it feels like at the moment. That people just want us to go drill a hole in the ground, and that's so. We've got to make sure when you're exploring and when you're appraising, the primary what you're primarily doing is your data gathering, and you need to make sure that you do that in as efficient a manner as possible, and that you're getting value for your money. So you don't want to go and drill the same hole and getting exactly the same data set. So you're trying to reduce your uncertainty for the accumulation that you're appraising, or you're trying to gain some new information from exploring, and that's by extending the play, drilling a new play, and trying to unlock the basin. So if you go to let's use Tulloh's exploration campaign in Uganda as an example. So the first wells, so they bought Energy Africa, and that's the portfolio that John and our other Ned, who'll be on board very shortly, they helped build that and put that together. And particularly our next Ned, he was intimately involved in that. And we had Bob Cassie, who was ex-Hardman Resources, their exploration manager, who also came in and was doing some advising for us when we were putting everything together. And there's a fantastic paper actually and presentation that he put together called Finding Oil in Uganda, and it talked about their journey and how it went through. That was more from a Hardman perspective. But Tulloh drilled some wells with Heritage before they made those basin opening discoveries, and they had a couple of teasing results with Tarako, which were drilled and found gas but had high CO2 content, and then Kaniwataba, which failed. Had some shows, but nothing commercial. And then when they drilled Warriga-1, which was the first well that they drilled with Hardman, they made that initial discovery, and it was quite modest initially. I mean, I think, and you can go and have a look at all the details in that paper that I mentioned. I think it was roughly 7 meters of net pay in Warriga-1 in total across two pools. So 2.5 meters and 4.5 meters in it. But that was enough, and Tulloh had seen enough then from what they drilled that they knew that the basin was working, there were hydrocarbons in the system, and that they had all these lookalike prospects along there that were going to get unlocked. And the strategy that they employed was to try and unlock as many of those as possible in the shortest time frame, rather than going and appraising and doing all of that. And that's what led to then the buy-in. But they also wanted to swallow their partners before they went too much and essentially proved up the value for them. We've seen some of that play out in the Perth Basin now at the moment, as well with Norwest and also Warriga. So I guess we don't have any partners, and so the ability to prove out multiple pools then unlocks a different kind of valuation for us versus one big thing. So these are all things that we've got to kind of weigh up and consider. And it's, as I said, the good thing is we've got options, and we're not pigeonholed into making a decision. We've got a rig available to us as well, services we can get in time when they're available. And the rig market in our neck of the woods is tight at the moment. And I guess that's also something that some uncertainty that we removed, is that we've got, we're not waiting around for a rig, which can take an inordinate amount of time to secure, as some people have discovered recently. So I mean, that's just some of the parts that we can consider and go for. And I guess, also we've got two fantastic new board members that have joined us, and they've trodden this path before, and I'm very keen to get their input and to see how they'd like to attack it, as well, what we think the best route is, and ultimately what the best route for the company and the shareholders is.
So thank you. How has farm-in or JV conversations have been developing? Obviously, you can't speak in any specifics here, but I mean, have you seen renewed interest or increased interest? I mean, what are the conversations you're having in light of your results that you've got from Mukuyu-1?
Yeah, look, certainly it's those doors have been knocked on again, our doors are being knocked on again, I should say, from people who've both been previously in the process and those who haven't been in the process and are keen to understand, get into the nitty-gritty and go and look at all the data. So, that again opens up another avenue as well for us, through farming out. We've done a lot of the hard work, taken the huge risk and the first step of drilling a well, soil risking. And I mean, if you'd asked me when I started Invictus, you'd end up soil risking and drilling a well and having this kind of result, I would have grabbed it with both hands. I would have said, probably that's the dumbest strategy I've ever heard, is going and soil risking and essentially trying to beat a statistically very, very hard game and drilling in a frontier basin where no wells have ever been drilled before. And I mean, people still drill dry wells in proven basins. It's a hard game, and there's a reason why not many people do this, and it's because it's hard. So yeah, it's I can't remember the original question. I've deviated away from that, but it's we've got some options ahead of us, and we're going to try and make. We're talking about farm out partners.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been the conventional route for everyone. As a small junior, go and try and market it, get some interest from a bigger partner, get carried for seismic and one well, and then have a roll of the dice and hopefully it comes in. So then we've completely bucked that trend, and it's always been never thought it would be an option that would have been open to us, primarily from a funding point of view and an appetite point of view. So that's been good, but it's a double-edged sword, because obviously there's the funding aspect, there's a dilution aspect of soil funding. If it worked out, and it should have worked out, and that's what's been the very hard thing to come to terms with for us, is we know where we should be, and all it needed is a fluid sample, and the tools failed, not the rocks. That's what the devastating aspect of this is. But nonetheless, we're very, very pleased with how it's turned out, and now I think everyone in the industry has been very complimentary to us, and I've had a lot of messages from everyone, and they're very excited for us and pleased for us, because success helps other explorers as well, and provides the appetite, because it is a hard game, and if you don't have people like Invictus putting themselves out there and going and do this, then no one finds anything. And so you always get that little burst from other people who make discoveries, and it kind of encourages everyone along. It's not to say that every single exploration well should get drilled, and a lot of poor ones get drilled for reasons that are commitments or whatever the case is, but everyone in the industry has been very supportive, and it's been nice to have that kind of recognition from people who understand what this game is from an exploration sense, how hard it is, and what our results mean.
Well, that you kind of are trailing into a question I was hoping to ask you too. Is this a good example of what retail or your casual layman investor sees as failure, that other majors or other larger companies looking to be farming partners would see it as success? Do you have these companies waiting for fluid samples, or are they already champing at the bit based on what they've seen?
No, based on what they've seen, they want to get in, and so we're signing CAs. Refreshing others that have expired, and a lot of people said, "Oh, this is too risky. These are the things that we're concerned about. Good luck," basically. And others, "Okay, well, we were wrong. Well done. We'd like to have another look now," because they see They see the running room that we have, the materiality of the portfolio that we have, and it's very, again, very, very rare that you're in this position as a junior where you've got the entire basin, and you've had a result, very good result by the fluid sample. And if you can't say this as a company director, but if you were to ask me if I wasn't involved in my technical hat or not, I'll tell you exactly what I thought of what we found. So it is something that's been missed by the market and has been mispriced, and I was surprised actually, and probably a lot of the criticisms I think of some of the announcements that me and the team write are too technical for people. They can't understand it. They just want to know whether we made a discovery or not, and that's as far as the analysis and due diligence goes. So, and that's some of that's fair criticism. Sometimes our announcements are hard to understand of what it means. But it is this is a technical business, and that's what separates good explorers from poor ones. And if you look, as the saying goes, oil is first found in the minds of men, and you've got to have a very good technical team to unlock it. And because we don't write simple announcements, maybe that takes away from some of the messaging in the public market. So that's fair enough criticism on that part. And up to me now to try and articulate what the results mean in a more digestible manner for kind of the ordinary investor and shareholder who doesn't have an oil and gas and technical background, much understanding. So
ultimately, it'll be the drill that does the talking that people really want to hear anyway, right? So in the end, all the marketing, all the advertising you do means nothing if you're actually drilling dusters. So I mean, I can see the frustration from some people, but I think that also that the well will tell us very, very clearly when good times have arrived, right? I'm just collecting loose ends here, and just one last one, just around the Upper Angwa reservoir quality. Can you just speak to that? Is it continuous sand? I mean, can you speak to the quality of it? Is it high quality, low quality? Is it various intervals? Is it a thick continuous one thick continuous sand? Can you just kind of clarify that?
Yeah. So as I said, it's called the alternations member because you've got alternating cycles of source and seal and reservoir, and they're roughly 100 meter, so between 80 and 120 meter kind of sequences between gross packages, shall we call them, of source, seal, and then reservoir, and then you get into your next sequence of source, seal, and reservoir. So they do. I mean, we do see some intervals that are rattier than others, some that are lower net to gross, and you expect them in this kind of depositional environment being fluvial, where it's not going to be. I mean, you do get various thicknesses and
seasonal variation.
Yeah, that's right. Seasonal variation depending on where you are in the system. If you're more towards the overbank and the edges of the system, or you're right in the middle. So, and again, we're talking this Upper Angwa unit is over 1,000 meters, so you're not going to get all these good channels stacked on top of each other because you get over millions of years the river course changes and it moves. So you've got some stuff that's good, some stuff that's poorer, and somewhere in between.
Importantly, the well is averaging that out as well, so I wouldn't get so fixated about having quite good permeability, because that's going to be averaged out, poor permeability. The well is the sum of all of the intervals at the end of the day.
Yeah, so we're talking about one single point in a massive big structure, and vertically you've got 11 reservoir intervals that we've seen so far, and more beneath us, and the Lower Angwa still, which is from what we've seen in outcrop, a bigger and blockier unit than what we've seen in the Angwa. So that's a massive sandstone versus what we've seen in the Upper Angwa. And then we've also seen bigger and thicker channels of outcrop in the Upper Angwa, which we've sampled, and you can see those pictures of that on some of our older presentations where we released that outcrop data. So as I said, it's unlikely that we penetrated this the Upper Angwa in the best spot, and almost certainly we haven't. And some channels, because we've got so many of them, not just one, are going to be better than others. And that's where 3D will really benefit in this type of system of where to go and target your. And the other reason for 3D is because we're going to need it to drill Mukuyu-3 and Mukuyu-4 and, you know, all the development wells after that. So at some stage we're going to have to shoot 3D. And we've got the vibes in Harare at the moment. They're sitting in our yard. You know, we can start shooting 3D as early as late March.
Well, I think the lesson from Namibia is get your 3D data first, and you know, go from there.
Yeah, we had a great result drilling on 2D, and now that we've had that encouragement, you know, 3D is a step that we will have to take at some stage, whether we drill Mukuyu-2 first or post 3D. You know, at some stage we're going to shoot it, and so we're weighing up when we do that.
Buy once, cry once, they say.
Yeah, that's a good saying.
Just one last category here. Sorry, Jamie, do you want to jump in there, Jamie?
No, I should probably shut up.
No, just I know that we are the three of us are a loquacious bunch here tonight, so I'm just trying to maybe navigate us roughly towards the ending here. One last major category, Scott, and it's going to be something that I know that you can't speak concretely to, but yeah, just future financings. Obviously, the market is awaiting some sort of financing update, right? We know you've got $12 or $13 million in the kitty, so you've kind of got enough for the next step. But obviously, there's a, you know, from this, I mean, I guess this is me editorializing now, but it really does sound like a calm confidence of, I mean, you know, you're talking about development wells and Mukuyu 3, 4, 5, and you're making choices not for the quick bang of a discovery play right now, but understanding that this is a multi-year process, and you're approaching this not as a marketer, but as a geologist, and that's something that I guess I give you kudos for, but also have to wrap my head around too, right? And I think that's a fairly valid perspective. But I guess my question is around financing, and again, I know it won't be concrete or specific, but what are your plans, right? I mean, is this something that maybe you are waiting for a farming partner now that, you know, you've got deals that are more approaching what you've deemed to be fair valuation? Are you just going to be doing small cash raises to try to get to you know, some sort of inflection point in the market? I mean, how are you navigating cash raising in the next 0, 6, 12 months?
Yeah, so I think our quarterly came out last week, and I think it's showed that we've got more cash, I think, than people thought. And maybe there was, again, some misunderstanding from the results webinar that I did when all that came out. So there's no immediate need for cash for us, because we've got some time before you know, we've got to order some additional long leads, which are relatively minor, a little bit of casing perhaps if we're going to drill Mukuyu-2 next. Some cement and some mud, and go out for tendering for services. So that, you know, that doesn't require a lot of money. The rig is sitting there, so we're not looking at any big mob costs. The rig bills have been paid, and you know, so we're not in a rush. So from a 0-month perspective, no. So that does open the doors for us, and we've had a lot of interest from, you know, again, strategics who now understand, who didn't want to play pre-drill, because again, they look at the stats and they say, well, you know, 95 times out of 100, I'm going to lose my shirt, and you know, so we'll wait until you guys are done, and then if things turn up, then we're interested. So those conversations are now starting to happen. Again, where everyone was really interested in the story, but thought it was too high risk. What we were doing, drilling a wildcat well. So, you know, there are those aspects. We've got farming opportunities now as well. You know, also going back to our existing shareholders, I think there is some appetite there, and, you know, the perpetual email commentary that I have is, you know, we'd like for retail shareholders to be able to participate, and I can understand that, because, you know, as I said in previous conversations that we had, that they do get a raw end of the deal when it comes to fundraising for ASX companies. But, you know, quite frankly, we don't set the rules, and it's hard to please everyone. You know, when we embarked on that raise, when we did, and we had to stare down essentially our farming partners and the market at the same time, that's a difficult juggling act to do. And once you made that decision, you've got to execute and fulfill it. Otherwise, you're in no man's land and swimming naked. So we've got a little bit more time up our hands now, so we can explore a number of options. They've all got pros and cons. So bringing in strategics, I think would disappoint some of our existing shareholders who'd like to be able to participate at these sort of levels. Essentially, now that we've de-risked the basin, that's the other thing I think has been frustrating, that we're trading at a level that's much lower than we were going into this pre-drill, when we had all of this risk and uncertainty and likelihood of failing. And now we've removed the vast majority of that risk, and we're at a much lower point than we are now, or than we were pre-drill. So that's also been a bit flummoxing to understand, and the risk that's priced in where we are now versus where we were is very different. And then so if we bring in strategics who understand the significance of what we've had, that's going to alienate some of our existing shareholders. Doing an SPP, again, that's an option for us, or a rights issue. That is consuming from a time and an effort perspective. Not to say that's the reason why we should do it, but it just takes a little bit longer to organize, and there's always that overhang in that period where everything's getting organized and the offer's open. And then the farm out route where you're looking at diluting at the asset level versus versus at the corporate level as well. But you take some risk off the table from a financing perspective, and from a burden perspective, particularly when things don't go according to plan or according to budget, then that does help shoulder some of that burden. And also, some JVs are very good at collaborating with you, and you get different ideas and different input and different opinions into what you should drill next, strategy wise, as well. So there are a number of pros and cons, and so again, this is discussion now for the new team to finalize and then pick a path.
I guess I will just. Oh, Jamie, you step in if you like.
No, I'm good.
Just it's a follow-up question that I think will probably end up not without a clear answer because of the reasons you explained. But I guess maybe the part I'm curious about is, are you looking to finance just one or two drills in advance and trying to keep whatever dilution down low until you hit that inflection point from a discovery, or are you maybe looking to get more long-term funding in place?
Yeah, again, that's also got to come into the equation as to whether it's one or two wells. What's the appetite for one or two wells from a funding perspective if we were to go and do this ourselves? Do we just go and drill Mukuyu-1 and try and prove up, have a step change in terms of our valuation, and then go from there? Or if we opened up a new play or extended the play, we'd do a similar thing. So, or do we have do we just bite the bullet and just go and drill two wells, as we plan to in the first campaign, with different play types, because you've got different risks associated with them. So yeah, it's something that we've got to settle on. I've got an idea of what I'd like to do, but again, would like to get the opinions and then settle on a strategy with the new board in place.
Yeah, and that's valid. Sounds like we'll just have to meet back here again in a month or two. Honestly, Scott, it's been much more. I was budgeting an hour and a half. We're approaching 2.5, so I think it's probably time for us to say goodbye. Jamie, do you have a last thought or last question you'd like to discuss quick?
No, just thanks for the time and the answers, and being so honest and candid about how things went.
Yeah,
good to see.
I'll echo that as well, Scott. Yeah, I always appreciate that you are very, very honest in these conversations, and you don't pull punches. And yeah, the exciting times ahead. Maybe not necessarily people we're looking for, but I think that if people actually stop and take time to understand what's going on, there's a lot of positives for people to remain excited about. But yeah, parting thoughts to you, Scott.
Yeah, well, just again, thanks for having me, and always a pleasure to join you on these sessions, and I think get to ask questions and get some insight into things that you can't put into ASX announcements or tease a bit more context out of it, I guess. So otherwise we'd have a rambling and incoherent 30-page long ASX announcement to digest, which would also turn people from reading them. So it's always great to do this and also get some questions that you don't expect from people as well. And sometimes you can't, you just don't know what people want to know. either. And I guess that's also with your assumed knowledge that you have sitting in the chair that I'm in. Sometimes you forget that people don't have all the context available to them. But yeah, I guess from our point of view, we've got got a nice period in front of us. We've got the campaign behind us now. We've got now the planning. We've already started for the next one. Got two fantastic new board appointments that have come in. So John Bentley and the other one, that'll be out in the next day or so. And I think people will also be very, very pleased with the pedigree of who we've been able to attract, and they should take some real comfort and belief out of those, people like John and who's coming in, that this is a company and a project with a huge amount in front of it and a huge amount of potential. And now also, they're not going to, particularly John, who can pick and choose what he does. He's not going to do it if it's not interesting and doesn't have the potential to move the needle. I think is also the difference. And we've got some lab results that'll be due soon. Some of them will take weeks. Some of them will be a bit longer, depending on what's coming out. We'll be able to put some more information about the results out on the public, which I think will satisfy a lot of the calls. Certainly, a lot of the emails that I've been getting are about when are the core results coming out. It's not like minerals. There's a bit of work that's involved in specific sequences. You've got to do some of these tests and make sure that they're being done properly. And then from a strategy point of view, again, the board will be in Zimbabwe in the next few weeks, and we'll also be putting out what the next steps will be for the company and the project. So people will be able to get a better idea of the timelines of what's coming up and what's ahead of us. But yeah, thanks everyone for their interest and for all the questions that have come in and for your support. It's been amazing from some of the message of support that I've got. Been great to have that sort of faith put in the company and put in me. And people are still invested emotionally and financially, obviously, in the company and its success and what it can do and be transformational. So always appreciative to all of our shareholders and investors as well for giving us the opportunity to go and do this and go and chase this very exciting project.
Well, I think that sounds like a decent place to end. Again, yeah, thank you for your time and your patience, Scott. Always a pleasure.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day, Scott.
Yes. Bye, everyone.